It is time for Money Power Politics, and the president is once again escalating his fight with the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell.
Today, President Trump once again berating Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
This week, he again mulled over the idea of firing Powell.
This guy is a numbskull. He keeps the rates too high.
And look, I know you're seeing a lot of headlines right now that look absolutely terrifying. Trump attacking the Federal Reserve. The Fed is losing its independence. This is seriously dangerous. And let's be honest, when that man attacks an institution, it's usually because it either refused to stock his line of branded victory water or, it's the concept of a fair election. And I'm a fan. I voted for him and I'd do it again. But this is the one thing that you really need to understand, because to get why a president trying to control the Fed is so terrifying, you have to know what the Fed is. And I promise you, you have absolutely no idea. I mean, you might think you do. It has federal in the name. It's in Washington, D.C., in a big, important looking marble building. It must be part of the government, right? Wrong. The thing is, the name Federal Reserve is basically a lie. It's a misnomer, which is a fancy word for it's lying directly to your face. It's like calling a koala bear a bear. It's not a bear, it's a marsupial. It's a judgmental, leaf-eating fuzzball of chlamydia. And the Federal Reserve, it's not federal. And as for reserves, let's just say its $6.7 trillion balance sheet, down from a peak of nearly $9 trillion in 2022, looks less like a nation's savings account and more like the world's most complicated and terrifying IOU that they're desperately trying to shrink. So if it's not the government, what is it? Well, let's go to the Fed's own website. This isn't some conspiracy blog. This is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. And I quote, "The Fed is organized similarly to private corporations." And it gets worse. Who owns it? You? Me? A very patriotic squirrel? No. Again, their words. The reserve banks are owned by the member banks. And like any good country club, dividends are paid to the member banks. And that's by law. 6% for smaller banks, or whatever's less between 6% and the 10-year treasury rate for the big boys. This is the organization that makes your country's monetary policy. They decide what your mortgage costs, currently sitting somewhere between a brutal 6.2 to 6.8%, or what your car payment is, whether your savings account earns anything other than contempt. And it is a private cartel of bankers who are legally guaranteed their dividends for the privilege of owning the place. It's like finding out the Supreme Court is owned by Ticketmaster, and all the justices get a cut of the convenience fees. And this brings us to Trump. He has been trying to fire the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, for one reason. Trump wants interest rates cut. Not just cut, he wants them slashed.
President Trump asked a group of GOP lawmakers if he should fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell.
President Trump is once again taking aim at his own pick for America's most powerful economic post, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Despite nominating him in 2017, Trump now wants him out.
And so when the Fed rate was at 4.5%, Trump was on social media demanding they cut it by 3%. That's not a haircut. That's a full-on public scalping. He wants lower rates to boost the economy, lower borrowing costs, and crucially, reduce the interest payments the U.S. government has to make on its massive, massive debt. The problem here is, cutting rates like that would be like throwing a tanker truck of gasoline onto the smoldering ashes of inflation. And here's the thing. While we're sitting at 4 to 4.25%, Switzerland is at 0.25%. Japan just crawled out of negative rates, and the European Central Bank is at 2.75%. We're actually among the highest in the developed world. So what did the independent Fed do at its last meeting on September 17th? They did cut the rate by a whopping 0.25%.
We begin this hour with your money and a highly anticipated decision that I believe was made just seconds ago by the Federal Reserve. The central bank has just voted to cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point. This is the first rate cut since December of last year.
It was the monetary policy equivalent of trying to stop a charging rhino with a stern look. And to add insult to injury, they released projections saying they might get rates down to 3 to 3.25% by the end of 2028. Trump did not like that. So Trump did what Trump does. He decided to remodel the place by force. First, he's been publicly and privately going after voting members. A Biden nominee, Lisa Cook, is currently fighting for her job as Trump tries to oust her over mortgage fraud allegations. That battle is now pending at the Supreme Court.
Well, in other news, President Donald Trump is taking his fight to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook all the way to the Supreme Court. He's asking the High Court to clear the way to remove her from the board entirely, which would change the face and the voting makeup of that board. Of course, this comes one day after the Fed cut interest rates for the first time in, 9 months? Mr. Trump says he fired Cook on the grounds that she committed mortgage fraud. Well, Cook fired back, denying this, and says the president doesn't have the authority to fire her.
While that's been happening, another Biden nominee, Adriana Kugler, resigned back in August. And this is where it gets truly insane.
Well, this is a total surprise. Obviously, there was some issue that she had to deal with that made her miss the Fed meeting, which is an extremely unusual thing to do. But we don't have any information on why she is resigning at this point.
Resigning, I understand it was over the fact that she disagreed with somebody from her party. She disagreed with too late.
September 15th, Trump's economic advisor, Stephen Mirren, is confirmed by the Senate to fill Kugler's empty seat. The next day, September 16th, Mirren is sworn into the Federal Reserve. And then the next day, September 17th, Mirren walks into his very first vote and immediately dissents. The whole board voted for that tiny 0.25% cut. But Mirren, he demanded a 0.5% cut, exactly what Trump wanted. You can literally watch the CNBC interviews where Mirren explains his dissent like he's auditioning for the role of Trump's Fed chair. He probably is.
So I think that growth is going to be better in the second half of the year because I think that growth in the first half of the year, which was weaker, but I think that that was caused in part by headwinds to the economy from uncertainty around trade policy and tax policy. There was the risk of the biggest tax hike in history, and that's been taken off the table and has been replaced with some powerful investment incentives. And there was uncertainty from trade policy, which has been replaced with trade deals and investment commitments. So I see better growth in the second half of the year.
So did you talk to him about how you would vote?
No, I did not. I did not talk to him about how I would vote. I did not talk to him about my dots in the statement of economic projections.
And you haven't talked to him since?
No.
This is called packing the Fed. And you might think, oh, Matt, it's just one vote out of 12. But the chair, Jerome Powell, his term expires May 2026, next year. And the second that happens, Trump will replace him with someone who thinks inflation is just what you do to a birthday balloon. And don't think the other 10 members will stand up to him. The Fed has what experts call a herd mentality. They just follow the leader, like a column of well-dressed ants marching toward whatever pile of sugar the new chair points at. Now you can agree or disagree with Trump. Maybe you want lower rates, fine. But you are missing the existential horror show here. The problem isn't just who is on the Fed. The problem is the Fed itself. The Constitution, you know, that document everyone loves to wave around at sporting events, but nobody has apparently read. Article 1, Section 8, it gives Congress the power to coin money, not a private organization of a cartel of bankers. The founding fathers hated this idea. Thomas Jefferson, and this is a real quote from his 1816 letter to John Taylor, not one your uncle found on Facebook, warned that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. And he had to deal with an army that was literally just farmers with hunting rifles. And yet we have this thing, an organization that is not part of the government, that is owned by the very banks it's supposed to regulate, that has no checks and balances, and that answers to nobody. And it can, with the flip of a switch, print money and fundamentally alter your entire life. So what does this mean for your actual savings account when Powell leaves in May next year? Well, here's the brutal math. If Trump's new Fed chair slashes rates the way he wants, remember, he was demanding 3% cuts, your savings account that's currently earning maybe 4 to 5% will plummet back to earning basically, nothing. It'll earn nothing. Meanwhile, the money printing that comes with those rate cuts will send inflation soaring again. So you might be earning maybe 1% on your savings, while your groceries go up at least 8% a year. It's financial death by 1,000 cuts. And here's what the history books tell us. When the Fed cuts rates aggressively, asset prices explode. We're talking 15 to 20% stock market gains. Real estate prices can jump from 5 to 10% annually. And if you're not holding assets, you're watching from the sidelines as your dollar loses 12% of its value against other currencies. tendencies. It's like being the only person not invited to the world's most expensive party, but you are still paying for the champagne. When the Fed, whether it's Trump's version or the independent version, turns on the money printers and slashes rates, who wins? People who own assets, stocks, real estate, your boss's third home. And who loses? Everyone else. Your rent goes up, your groceries cost more, your savings account becomes a daily joke. It is a direct, high-speed transfer of wealth from the middle and lower classes to the ultra-rich. It widens the wealth gap until it becomes a chasm, and that always ends in chaos and civil unrest. What Trump is planning is just that, but on crystal meth. He's not just going to turn the money printers back on, he's going to kick it up a few notches. We're talking about accelerating inflation, a massive boost to asset prices, and a quickening of the entire world deciding our dollar is about as valuable as a used napkin. And here's the thing about independence. We've seen this movie before. In the 1970s, Nixon pressured Fed Chair Arthur Burns to keep rates low, and we got stagflation that took a decade to fix. It wasn't until Paul Volcker came in and jacked rates to 20% that we finally killed inflation. But that took a recession so brutal, it made grown economists cry. So what can you do? When Powell leaves in May, your savings won't just lose value gradually. They'll be in a controlled demolition because the new Fed chair won't just turn on the money printers. They're going to strap rocket boosters to them. Honestly, not much to stop this train, but you can try to protect yourself. This isn't financial advice, but a system designed to inflate away the value of your cash means you should probably learn about assets that don't lose value. Whether that's real estate, or stocks, or I don't know, a bunker full of gold, which historically rises 25% during dollar debasement periods. Because it's pretty clear that the people in charge are playing a game of musical chairs, and they've already taken your chair, sold it for parts, and given themselves a 6% dividend on the profit. Now I know what you're thinking. Great, Matt, so I need to buy real estate to protect myself from this monetary madness. But I work 60 hours a week. I don't know a contractor from a con artist, and the last time I tried to fix a leaky faucet, I flooded my kitchen and somehow made it worse. Look, I get it. The Fed is about to turn your savings into monopoly money, but you don't have time to become a real estate mogul. Totally understand. You don't want to deal with 3 a.m. phone calls about broken toilets. You don't want to learn how to evaluate neighborhoods, and you definitely don't want to figure out if that charming fixer-upper is actually a money pit disguised as an investment opportunity. But here's the thing. There's actually a way to get into real estate investing without becoming a landlord, without learning construction, and without turning your weekends into a nerve-ending home improvement nightmare. I pulled this video out here to walk you through it. And considering what's about to happen to your cash when Powell gets the boot, you might want to pay attention to it. I'm going to show you exactly how busy people are protecting themselves from this Fed disaster without becoming real estate experts. So click here to watch that next, and I'll see you over there. If not, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Take care.